This is Andy Purewal for ID Boxing. For the first time in a long time, I'm joined by Dan Rafael over in America over Zoom. Dan, how's life treating you?
Life is treating me good. We've got a beautiful day in Northern Virginia. We've got some good fights this weekend, so life couldn't be better.
We have got some good fights. There's nothing over here in the UK, so all of us have to pull the late shift to tune in and watch a number of shows. Let's just start off with the most recent one I just saw on Twitter. Bam Rodriguez attempting to become world champion once again. Walk me through what you expect to see from this fight, and is it as straightforward as what people might think?
Well, I don't think that it's ever really. I mean, there are certain times where you think things are straightforward. When you're fighting another decent opponent, another good opponent, a guy that's hungry like you are, there's nothing straightforward about it. Look, Bam had a great year in 2022. You know, he had won a world title. He beat two big names in his weight class in Quadras and Sarangi side. Great victories. Didn't have a great performance, let's say, against Israel Gonzalez, but good enough to sure win that fight. And you know, he was active. And here he comes back now into the ring. He goes home to San Antonio, where he's going to draw obviously a hometown crowd. There's going to be a lot of excitement for him in San Antonio, and he's going to take on a guy that's going to be hungry in Gonzalez. That's there. You know, he's moving down in weight, so we'll see if that has any impact. Remember when he went up and won the world title, he actually went up in weight by 2 divisions from where he had been fighting. But of course, he should win. But that's what makes boxing go around. There are upsets all the time. And, you know, with a young fighter like that, who's probably not even reached his prime just yet, you got to like Bam in this fight. But I'm interested in watching it. I mean, to me, of the 3 notable American shows on DAZN, Showtime, and ESPN, they're all good shows. Nothing is great. There's no big fight. So they're all, I'm not knocking any of the shows. They're all reasons to watch all 3 of them. But for me personally, I'm most interested in the DAZN show because I like Bam Rodriguez. I like watching him. There's a good, interesting, you know, title fight with MJ Akhmadaliev defending his unified title on the undercard. So for me, I'm most interested in the Bam fight. But you know, straightforward, maybe not, but a pretty good fight, I hope.
Dan, last year certainly was that breakout year for Bam Rodriguez. He just shot to stardom. And when you look at those lower weights, the fights which could be out there, they're kind of mouthwatering just to think about. But just kind of looking at the UK perspective, obviously we heard and saw Eddie Hearn and Matchroom announce the signing of Sonny Edwards last week. And it's a fight which has been mentioned now for probably about a year or so. To your knowledge, do you think that if Bam comes through, we will see him versus either Sonny or maybe Julio Cesar Martinez in the immediate aftermath of however his fight goes on Saturday if he gets his hand raised?
Well, if you listen to what Eddie has to say and you listen to what Sonny Edwards has to say and the back and forth that he and Martinez have had, it seems to me anyway that the next order of business in those fights that you mentioned would be for Martinez to fight Sonny. That's a good fight, an attractive fight, different kind of styles. Obviously, Martinez is the brawling, straight ahead kind of guy. Sonny is a really good, slick boxer. You know, it's an appealing matchup. And if Bam comes through this fight Saturday, certainly, you know, maybe there'll be a defense, but you know, in the next sometime this year, let's say, before the year's out. I mean, there's still plenty of time left. We're here still at the beginning. You'd like to think that maybe they can finish off the year with, if Bam is still standing, taking on the winner if the fight happens between Sonny Edwards and Martinez. That's a really good plan in an exciting weight class with some very talented guys. And you know, I've always sort of been a connoisseur of you know, of the Chocolatito and Estrada type of fights and those types. You know, this is maybe not those fights, but it's in that same vein. So, you know, hopefully they'll make it happen. And if they're all with Matchroom and they're all have an interest in fighting each other, and I know the fans would certainly be interested to see those kinds of fights. I see no reason why they wouldn't have. I don't know of Martinez, Edwards, or Bam Rodriguez to be turning fights down. And these are fights that can help make them bigger stars, and especially in those smaller weight classes, obviously make them the most money.
We put a clip out earlier, and Sonny Edwards said that he's the best back foot boxer in the world in his eyes. There's no denying the talent he has, and him, Bam, Julio Cesar Martinez, all contrasting styles. If they were to have somewhat of a round robin, shall we say, they were all to face each other, who do you think would come out on top?
I mean, it's hard to say because, as you said, they all have different positive attributes about them. I mean, Sonny Edwards is a very excellent boxer. Martinez has shown a lot of grit and determination and a good banger and a good brawler and a guy can comes to fight. I think Bam is kind of a hybrid. He can box and he can punch. they both bring, or all three of them bring a lot to the table. I mean, it'd be unfair to, I haven't really thought about it a lot, so I'm not ready to make my pick who emerges from the top three. That said, though, the boxing abilities of Sonny are hard to overlook, and when it comes boxer versus puncher, if the chin is there, usually the boxer can prevail. But I would never count out Bam Rodriguez. And if Martinez lands, he probably can stop anybody. So there's reasons to sort of give all three a chance. And that's frankly one of the things that would make those types of fights interesting, is because we can't sit here and say with authority who is like the bona fide favorite of that group of guys.
Dan, moving on from that show, obviously you got Sebastian Fundora, the towering Sebastian Fundora, returning as Brian Mendoza. Walk me through that one.
Well, Fundora is obviously a very exciting fighter. He kind of burst on the scene to some degree. Last year, he had that fantastic fight with Erickson Lubin. A lot of people called it the fight of the year, or certainly in the top few. And he rallied from the first time he ever got knocked down, and did the job against Lubin, a good fighter also. And he's sort of running in place in a sense, because he wants the bigger fight. He wants to fight for the bona fide world title. He holds the interim title right now of the WBC. But as anybody that follows this thing knows, that Charlo is tied up with as the undisputed champion. He's supposed to fight Tim Tszyu. It already had to be postponed once because Charlo has been dealing with a broken hand in two places. And, there's questions about when he'll actually be ready to come back. At one point, you thought maybe he's back like June, July. Now it seems like maybe it might not be till August, September. So it depends on when he comes back. But even when he does come back, his first order of business is to fight Tszyu. And the Fundora mandatory would be off a little while. So with all the titles tied up, on the one hand, it's good because there's clarity as who's the number one guy. But on the bad side, that number one guy, unfortunately, is not active. And so if you're a Fundora fan, or if you're Fundora himself, you're kind of stuck running in place. So what do? There's no other big fight for you right there. So they've kind of got to look and see who they can fight. That's not that's a good matchup, but maybe not the biggest fight. And that's sort of where he finds himself on Saturday. Mendoza's a solid fighter. I can't knock him for taking on the match. He's proven himself with some good fighters, wins and loss, whatever. But Fundora, again, we talked about it in the last fight we discussed. Is it a straightforward victory? You look at it, you think, well, he should win the fight. But he did show some vulnerability against Lubin, and Mendoza's looked good in the last couple of fights. I mean, I like Fundora to win, of course, but you just never know. So again, it's the same theme of this whole weekend. It's a decent fight. It's a good fight, but it's not like something that I would have to be like, oh, I got to make sure I'm home in front of the TV to make sure I 100% catch that live, but it's worth watching. And if you like Fundora, and if you're a boxing fan, I'm not sure how you can't enjoy watching Fundora fight. You're probably going to check it out.
Is, as you mentioned earlier on in your answer, Fundora, he says he's stuck in a bit of a rock and a hard place with the titles all being held up. You mentioned Tim Tszyu there being next in line to challenge Charlo, depending on how his injury obviously heals up and when that can take place. But just thinking of Tszyu, as you mentioned him there, about 10 minutes before I came onto this Zoom with you, I saw a clip where Ben Shalom's said that he's reached out to Team Tszyu to potentially look at a fight between him and Liam Smith for the latter part of this year. Have you heard anything at all? Do you know anything about if that would be deemable or possible?
I mean, that's news to me. If Ben says he reached out for him, he reached out for him. I mean, that's not a bad matchup. I think that Tszyu probably would prefer to have the title fight with Charlo. Obviously, it's what he's been waiting on. I have to believe there's more money in that fight for Tim than there would be in a Charlo fight. It's certainly a lot more meaningful. It's not a knock on Liam Smith, but Liam Smith's not a champion. He's got a good name, obviously. Ben saying that, if that's in fact what he said, leads me to believe that they're not necessarily going to end up going forward in the next fight with Eubank Jr. I guess if you're in the Liam Smith and Ben Shalom camp, it never hurts to ask. But if you're in the Tim Tszyu camp, I wouldn't consider like he's ducking the guy. It's sort of like, I don't really need that fight. I got this other fight already set to deliver me the potential undisputed championship. So why in the world would you take a fight that's not nearly as big against Liam Smith when you're guaranteed this shot, where they already even have a deal in place? It's not even like they got to make a negotiation. They have the deal that was done. It was postponed because of an injury. So that contract, one would suspect, is still in force until when Charlo is ready to return, within a reasonable time frame. So yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. I mean, that's the thing. They can make that down the road if Tim Tszyu wins, if he loses, whatever, and if Liam Smith is still doing his thing. nothing wrong with that fight, but I don't see that being reasonable as the next fight.
Just to swing back to the shows this weekend, and the final one we haven't touched on is the supremely talented Shakur Stevenson returns against Yoshino. Again, just walk me through his bout up at lightweight.
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, is straightforward. That's one of the terms we've used. Look, Shakur Stevenson, he's won titles in 2 weight classes at featherweight and junior lightweight. He obviously got stripped of the title at junior lightweight before his last fight because he didn't make the weight. So this is his first official fight as a lightweight, a WBC eliminator. This is not the biggest matchup in the world. His opponent is not a well-known fighter at all. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter, but Shakur Stevenson's on a different level. I mean, he's already one of the best fighters in the world. He's fighting at home. I know how hungry the kid is. I just don't. I'm hard pressed to really, and I've seen his opponent fight at least once. Hard pressed to like really say he's got a strong chance to actually win. So you watch that kind of fight, not because you think you're going to see the fight of the year or some dramatic competition. You watch that because you're impressed and amazed by the just the abilities and the pure skill and outstanding level that Shakur Stevenson is capable of fighting at. So that's the way I would look at that fight. It's sort of like when you would see Lomachenko against a guy that maybe he was overmatching, or Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao, guys who were great fighters that were taking on fights that were necessary or whatever reasons were, and you kind of knew they weren't going to be hugely competitive. But there's something about watching a brilliant fighter do his thing against whoever it is. And that's sort of the way I feel about Shakur. So I'm a big Shakur Stevenson fan. I look forward to watching him, but I don't have like huge anticipation it's going to be some kind of amazing, competitive, memorable matchup. The positive side of it also is the other 2 fights that are on the televised part of the undercard anyway are the 2 guys that I picked in the previous 2 years as the prospects of the year. You got the lightweight Keyshawn Davis, who was for me anyway, the 2022 prospect of the year. And then also on that card, you got the heavyweight Jared Anderson, who I had as the 2021 prospect of the year. Again, they're not fighting big mega fights, but they're taking reasonable steps up against reasonable opposition of where they are in their careers. And you just want to see if they can continue to improve and rise to a higher level and stay on track to the bigger and better fights.
Dan, just sticking with Shakur, obviously Bob Arum, Top Rank, they've made no secret that they'd love to make the winner of Haney-Loma against Shakur, provided there's no hiccups for him on Saturday night. Do you believe that whoever wins between Devin Haney and Vasyl Lomachenko will entertain that fight, will step between the ropes with Shakur? Or do you think they might look elsewhere? Obviously, Devin, there's a lot of talk of him moving up to 140 in the near future. Vasily Lomachenko, he'd keep those belts in-house then, so it would make sense to make the Shakur fight.
Well, Shakur is in the eliminator this weekend. So the winner of that fight will become the mandatory in the WBC. I haven't paid close attention to the order of those mandatory fights. As you know, in the world of unified titles, there's the rotation system. We've dealt with that as related to what was going on in the heavyweight division with Alexander Usyk. But certainly, Shakur and Lomachenko, I'm sure, would be entertained by Top Rank and the 2 fighters if Lomachenko beats Haney and Shakur wins on the weekend. With Devin Haney, that's a different story. And I say that not because he's looking to duck a guy or anything like that, but I do believe very strongly that win or lose, he's moving up to 140 after this fight. And in addition to that, he's also, my understanding, this was his last fight on the contract with Top Rank. So not to say he wouldn't necessarily re-sign with them, but he would be a promotional free agent. So the combination of being a free agent and potentially moving up in weight, if you're the winner, he's probably going to vacate anyway. What that tells me is that if he were to win the fight, Shakur ends up getting a chance to fight for the vacant title. If Lomachenko wins the fight, Top Rank may pursue that fight. It's possible. But again, I'm not sure what the order of the mandatories are. But I think it's pretty safe to say that at some point, if Shakur and Loma are successful, that would be an obvious fight for Top Rank to try to put together. You got the great, older, incredible technical fighter with a lot of accomplishment, with the similarly skilled but younger fighter. Is it the OG that takes the cake, or is it the young guy on the way up? I mean, it's a good matchup. It's an interesting matchup, but I think that's a little ways away still.
Just interesting to touch on Devin there. As you mentioned, you expect him to move up, as a lot of people have expected it to happen at some point over this last 6 months to 12 months. if he does, obviously we know the ruling with the WBO instantly, gives you the chance if you move up to challenge for whoever's a champion at that point. Currently held by Josh Taylor. A lot of talks of a Teofimo-Lopez fight. Nothing official announced. June 10th, New York's been reported for some time now. Do you have anything concrete on that, Dan?
That fight will happen on June 10th. They've already constructed part of the undercard. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I actually have some of the undercard fights already listed on my calendar on my danrayfield.substack.com newsletter page. Right now, I think the biggest, I won't even call it a hurdle, they just got to deal with it in terms of making that fight official, is because of the problems that some of the fighters that were formerly associated with MTK have had in traveling to the United States. Tyson Fury, Tommy Fury, we can go down the line. They have to make sure that Josh can come to the States. So my understanding is that they were going to do, in essence, a test run, if you will. Get him here, make sure everything is in order, send him home, and that way he'll be able to come back, not wait till like the week of the fight or a press conference to, make sure he can get here, but to take care of that so there's no issues. So once they resolve that and they know for sure that Josh can come and travel here, I don't think that will be a problem, and they'll make and that fight will be formally announced. But I'm quite certain that fight is definitely on their drawing board and planning, and not just planning, but they've got agreements between the sides. They just have to make sure that Josh can freely travel to the United States. And again, it's not because Josh is being accused of doing anything wrong. It's just that the United States government's not messing around, and all the business that went down with Kinahan, they've got a whole bunch of people that were associated in some form or fashion with MTK who can't come here. They had like 200 fighters, so they didn't all do things wrong. They just kind of got caught up in that web, and Josh is one of those guys.
Dan, talk to me. Spence-Crawford.
Oh, please.
We was all absolutely devastated when we didn't see that at the back end of last year, and then this week we saw reports emerge that June 17th seemed to be in play. Now I know you've tweeted yourself, you've put out there that talks have picked back up again, but June 17th does not look likely. What do you know?
Listen, I'm not going to knock other folks for doing their jobs. I read, it's not reports. There was one report from my good friends at The Ring magazine. I have all the respect in the world for the folks at The Ring. I've done ample work for The Ring over the last few years. I have nothing but good things to say about those guys. They reported, one writer reported that they had a deal for June 17th in Vegas, that they said it would be announced. I don't remember the exact words that were used in the story, but that in essence it would be announced during the fight week of the Gervonta Davis Ryan Garcia fight. It is not uncommon at all if a company is doing a major fight, and on the Saturday of that major fight, calling together all the press that have attended that fight to do a press conference prior to the start of that show to announce the next big fight. It would obviously make sense if they're doing a June 17th fight when there's going to be so much press at Tank Davis against Ryan Garcia, and that if PBC is also doing a fight between Errol and Terrence Crawford, you've got everybody in the media there. You're going to call them together and announce the fight and get the promotion off to a good start. And it's a great idea. And if it could happen, that would be fantastic. So when I saw that story, then, and by the way, just to back up for a minute, like for the last, I don't know, month, maybe a month and a half, whatever it's been, and I haven't written it because I didn't have like actual, like concrete, like information. I had people telling me different things, so I didn't think were necessarily lying, but you just couldn't really nail it down for sure. But there's absolutely zero doubt that the two sides have come together to begin these talks again, or to continue the talks, if you will, from all the bullshit that went down at the end of last year. But that said, there's no deal in place to my knowledge. So when I saw the story, and I had heard June 17th as one possible date, the scenario that was laid out about maybe announcing it the weekend of the Tank Davis Ryan Garcia fight, I had heard that also. But again, when I saw the story, I was a little surprised, because all along I've been told and I don't just talk to like third party, fourth party, I'm talking to people who are directly involved in the deal negotiations, who know exactly, or a good portion of what's happening, who have some reason to be involved and know. So, and there's, that orbit of people is not massive, but there's definitely several people that would know what's going on. And so when I read that, and I have been keeping in touch with a variety of people that are in that similar position, you make the phone call, you make the text message, whatever it is, and you do it separately. It's not like you're talking to two people at the same time and they can look at each other and, whatever. You do it separately, and you hear what they have to say or look at what they have to write. And, if they agree and they say the same sorts of things and everything sounds reasonable, and you check with this, you check with that. Again, as I tweeted, the best version of the truth as I know it is that they are still trying to get the deal done. It is not done as of at least, like, let's say yesterday, because I frankly haven't checked on anything related to it today. I've had some other stuff to do. But that even if they do make a deal, June 17th is definitely not the date. It will not be June 17th. Now, that's not to say they couldn't come finalize a deal, in the next couple of weeks and maybe still do some kind of announcement on the day of the Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia fight. That would be obviously something that they would probably want to do. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So again, hopefully the fight gets made, but I'm so sick and tired of the back and forth and the nonsense. I will continue to check on it and to do my due diligence as a reporter and all, but I'm not tweeting shit about this fight being made until I know it's made. And I don't care what anybody else has to say. I know who I talk to, and I know the veracity of what they say. And these are people that I've dealt with for a long time, who I believe in, who have not done me wrong. And, you got to kind of go with who brought you to the dance. And until I hear it from them that there's a real deal and it's done, I don't care what anybody else has to say about it. You show me that it's done and I'll believe it from those folks.
Dan, obviously listening to you talk there, it seems to be a case of talks are progressing, but they're still some way apart. Would that be a
I honestly, I'd be lying if I could characterize it for you exactly as to whether they're 90% there or 80%, 95. I know this, that it doesn't matter if it's 99.9999. That last 0.00001 is a bitch to get done. So it doesn't matter. All that other 99% doesn't mean shit until they get the last percent done and they sign on the dotted line. So they could be at 50% and have some huge breakthrough and get everything else squared away in 5 minutes, and then you have a done deal. So the percentage and is it close? Is it, wake me when it's over.
Dan, moving away from that one, but as you mentioned,
you're getting me all pissed off now about this. I'm just kidding.
Don't worry, Dan. I feel your pain.
I hear you.
Just as you mentioned,
well, you probably get asked about it also, right? I mean, come on.
I do, but thankfully, being in the UK, it's not something which comes up as much over here as what I imagine you get it over stateside. But as you mentioned, Tank Garcia, Dan, I suppose a pessimist in me still thinks that some way, shape, or form something will happen, meaning that doesn't happen come April 22nd. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on, I've been seeing a lot of people mentioning the type of records it could break on the door in terms of the gay pay-per-view records. How do you expect it not just to sell on the door, but obviously pay-per-view front? How do you expect it to do across all platforms?
I think it's going to do very well. I mean, but I temper my expectations, if you will, not because it's not a very attractive fight, a fight that we've all wanted to see for a long time, a fight that's going to appeal to a certain segment of people that are not necessarily the diehard boxing fans because they, Tank Davis has broken through a little bit in mainstream. Ryan Garcia, same thing, maybe even more so because of his Instagram and all the millions of people that follow him compared to Tank Davis. So I have no reason to expect it to be anything other than a big smashing success. But I also would tell anybody that in the world of hype and stuff we live in boxing, it's not breaking any pay-per-view records and it's not breaking any gate records. That is 100%. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there's zero chance on the planet Earth or any other galaxy or universe you can think of where it's going to break the record of the gate that Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao did, which was $75 million. And if I'm not mistaken, the prices that the tickets are set at wouldn't even come close to setting that kind of record. Now, does that mean it can't do a $15 or $20 million gate? I don't know what they scaled it for, but yeah, I mean, I guess it could at T-Mobile. They've got obviously a lot more seats than they have there than they do at the MGM Grand, which is where some of those other big mega fights in Las Vegas history have taken place at certain ticket prices. So the gate records is out of the question. That's not even close. It's going to do great, obviously. And the pay-per-view record's out of the question because Mayweather is an anomaly, but he and Pacquiao did 4.6 million. He and Conor when they did their, UFC boxing crossover fight, that did like 4 million buys. And then there's a lot of fights that have done, deep into the high millions, whether it's even in like the lower 2 millions, Mayweather versus, and when I say pay-per-view, I'm talking about, to make sure we're clear on the metric, domestic United States pay-per-view, which has always been the apples to apples comparison. So when I say to you that Mayweather Pacquiao did 4.6 million, that's in North America or whatever the HBO Showtime universe was, which I think also included Canada and Puerto Rico. But the point is, I'm not talking about if it was on pay-per-view in Australia or if it was on pay-per-view in the UK or someplace like that. So it won't break those types of records because it's just not conceivable, because Tank is a popular pay-per-view guy these days, but his fights top out when he's fighting regular guys, 200 and something thousand. Ryan has never been on pay-per-view. At least, he's been on a Canelo undercard, I guess, on pay-per-view, but never on a main event on pay-per-view. So again, I'm not in any way downing the fight or downgrading or making light of it or saying it's not a big event, but I like to make sure that people understand what they're dealing with. If somebody comes into this fight thinking, oh my God, it's going to be the biggest pay-per-view all time, I mean, you're absolutely on drugs. So that's just not the case. But it's going to be a huge event, a very popular event. I'm excited. I'm going to Vegas for the fight. I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. It should be a great week. And hopefully these two guys do everything that they've talked about leading up to the fight and give us a great matchup that night.
Down away from them, but speaking of a man who used to box at that weight and he's currently in the limelight for the wrong reasons. We obviously saw the recent news of Amir Khan failing a UKAD test. He's obviously somebody who spent a proportion of his career boxing out stateside. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how this story's unfolded and why it's taken until a year on from the test and from when he found out for it to suddenly come into the public domain.
I wish I had an answer for that made sense. First of all, I'm very disappointed that Khan failed the drug test. I've always held Amir in the highest regard. I like him personally. I've known him for years. I've covered his entire professional career. Not too long after his retirement announcement following the Brook fight, we had a fantastic interview where I spent, probably like, I don't know, half an hour or so, interviewing him, just going over old times in his career and all the different things that he accomplished and the big fights he was involved in. I mean, like I said, I've never had anything bad to say about Amir Khan. I like him a lot. Was always one of the guys that would fight anybody, never ducked a top challenge. And, I always respected that. I don't know the specific details of what happened with this drug case. I did read the UKAD report. I did write about it a little bit. I'm not sure, what Khan has said specifically about it. I saw like a brief clip of an interview he did about it. He says he didn't take it knowingly, but I've yet to hear an athlete in any sport when they get busted for a bad PED test say anything other than they didn't take it knowingly. So that's a disappointment. Now, the one silver lining, if there is such a thing, is that because of this drug test that he failed, he's now banned for 2 years. And hopefully that will put the kibosh on any delusions of grandeur of making a comeback after the retirement, because he probably shouldn't have come back to fight the fight against Kell Brook anyway, even though I understood it because of the fact that a lot of people wanted to see it for a long time and obviously made a great payday. But hopefully this finally brings to an end his career. He shouldn't be fighting anymore, just from a physical standpoint. Now, the other part of the question was about the UKAD business and why it took so long for them to come out with what happened. I've never understood how UKAD operates. They're a joke when it comes to that. Now, this is not the first time, and the details maybe are slightly fuzzy in my memory, but if I'm not mistaken, like, didn't the same thing happen with Tyson Fury, where he had a backdated ban that it was so long between the time that the thing happened that he actually fought and beat Klitschko for the heavyweight title, and then it was only after he was heavyweight champion did we find out that he was on a backdated ban because of a positive drug test? As I wrote in a column today, there is a happy medium between the rush to judgment and dragging it out for 2 years. Like, I get you shouldn't convict somebody in like a week. You should go through the proper investigation, hearing, talk to people, get everybody's side of the story. Basically all the things that aren't being done in the Conor Benn situation. But there's a difference between rushing and barreling through it to convict somebody and taking 2 years and letting the guy continue to fight without having some clarity. I know I've covered drug testing for a long time. Plenty of stories, good and bad, about positive tests and clean sport and all that business. It does not take 2 years to determine if a guy has a bad test or not. I mean, that's not how it operates with VADA. That is not how it operates even, and I don't really think much of USADA, which is our, United States version of UKAD, but even they don't take that long. To me, the whole thing is just ridiculous. And the fact that Ben Shalom and the folks at Boxer, as I read in Ben's statement, that they didn't even find out about it and it was their promotion until the ban was announced this week. That is ridiculous. So, I understand why Kell Brook is upset. I said there's only one silver lining, and it's that because Khan is now banned for 2 years, or backdated anyway to February of last year when the fight took place, or maybe it was April, I guess, whenever the provisional suspension was issued. The point is that because of that, it's going to be a long layup, that the chance of them fighting again are very, very small. But the whole process needs to be streamlined and changed and fixed because it's a fucking mess.
I don't think
Pardon the French.
I don't think you'll find many people who disagree with that
It's not exactly. I mean, you can make
that.
controversy once in a while. That is not a controversial statement. That drug testing timeline is terrible and a mess.
Yeah, like I said, and I think you'll struggle to find someone who disagrees with your ending there. Just a couple more topics to touch on. I spoke to Shelley Finkel out in Saudi when Jake Paul and Tommy Fury fought, and I kind of brought up the conversations he'd been having with Eddie Hearn. He said that they had somewhat started to rebuild their relationship, and there was looking towards a potential fight between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua at the time. I'm always interested to know, have you heard anything about that since obviously we've seen AJ return against Jermaine Franklin this past weekend? Do you know if a Deontay Wilder fight could happen any point soon?
I mean, it's a fight that Shelley and Deontay have said they've wanted for a very long time. But as far, and I talk to Shelley Finkel on a regular basis also, and my most recent conversations with him have been that while yes, he and Eddie have gotten along better in recent months and they have talked about it, there's nothing like imminent or a structure or a plan or anything like that. Matter of fact, there was more conversation I had with Shelley about some of the conversations he had. Again, I don't want to say this is happening and make people write false headlines in business, but just that it at least was a conversation that came up of Shelley's communications with one of the representatives for Francis Ngannou about looking to maybe make that kind of fight. So they're looking for a big fight for Deontay Wilder. They would love to fight Joshua. They'd love to fight Usyk. They would love to fight Ngannou if it would made sense and they could do it. So, to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing that is imminent for Deontay, certainly in terms of a Joshua fight. I do think if it did happen, that there is the likelihood that there would probably be another fight first. That if he was going to do that and make like a 2-fight deal with Eddie, they'd probably go and do some other fight first, whoever it would be, and then maybe Joshua. But I don't know what Joshua is, going to do. He obviously had the victory against Jermaine Franklin. Certainly the conversation, at least within the public and the demand, once again, will heat up for him to fight Tyson Fury, as I know the fight that Joshua said he wants most. So I would think that Joshua is probably most focused on trying to see if they can make a deal with Fury, who they've been close with a couple of times. But as I mentioned earlier, that last couple percent is always the hardest. But probably from the Joshua camp, more interest in a Fury fight than in a Wilder fight for 2 reasons. Number one, it's more money, and it's obviously for the title.
Dan, just sticking with Deontay, you mentioned Francis Ngannou and Alexander Usyk there. Just on both of them, what was your knowledge to how well or how far those Ngannou talks went? And just with Usyk, I remember it being out in Saudi, and then there were some reports that started to emerge that conversations had gone pretty well about them two potentially facing each other if the Fury fight fell through for Alexander. So yeah, just your understanding as to if those talks end up going anywhere. Obviously, we now know Usyk Dubois seems more likely because of the rotation in terms of mandatories and what have you.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Usyk situation, is my most recent correspondence with Alex Gracia, which is his promoter, said to me unequivocally, we're going to try to make that Dubois fight, and that would probably be this summer, assuming that Dubois' knee is healthy and they can, be ready to fight. So they made Alexander made the point to me, and it's not the first time he's made this point. He made the point to me on a number of occasions, when the Fury fight was being discussed, when it was falling apart, after it fell apart, and then, just as I mentioned, the most recent back and forth we've had. For them, maintaining his titles are important. They're going to fulfill their mandatories. They're not going to get him stripped. They're not going to give up a title. So they want to become undisputed. It was never that they wanted to fight Fury specifically. They want to fight whoever has the WBC belt, and it happened to be Fury at this moment in time. And they're willing, I guess, at this stage of the game to play along and see what happens and look to try to make a fight with whoever has that WBC title at some point. But in the meantime, he's going to maintain his current belts, and that means fighting against Daniel Dubois or whoever the mandatory that they have to fight is. And they're not necessarily looking for some other fight, which is actually a little bit of a different change because after Usyk defeated Anthony Joshua in the rematch, he basically said, I want to fight Tyson Fury or I might retire. Clearly, that's off the table at the moment. And there's no reason why Usyk should be retiring anyway, unless he wants to, because he's still fighting at an extraordinarily high level and making the biggest money of his career. So that's Usyk is looking at the mandatory. And as far as with Ngannou and the conversations that they were explained to me by Shelley Finkel was not even necessarily like deal points like, well, how much money or what's a split. It was general things like, hey, if we decided to go forward and do this, we'd be interested, but under actual regular boxing rules, for example, no hybrid fights, no weird gloves, no weird rings or octagons or, 2-minute rounds or anything like that. It was just sort of very general. And the message that I was given by Shelley is that the representative for Ngannou and Shelley, they liked each other. They got along good. They felt like they could be some business to do, but there was a way more to do if they were ever going to be serious about it. I think, if Deontay had his way, he'd fight a real top heavyweight boxer for, some stakes. And, if Ngannou presented itself and somebody wanted to put up a pot of gold for it, obviously they wouldn't turn it down.
I just want to say I apologize if you saw me quickly run off there. My house phone started going off, so I just had to go and turn that off, not to distract you. Just a final one.
I'll tell you what, I did a lot of TV for ESPN in my day, and the rule of thumb from the producer was whatever happens, just keep going until somebody tells you to stop.
I'll keep that in mind for next time. Dan, just very final one though. Tyson Fury, it all seems to have gone quiet as to what he's going to do now that Usyk fight has fallen through. Do you know anything?
I know I've been enjoying the silence.
That's fair enough. I don't think many people have, to be fair.
I don't think anything more needs to be said on that. I mean, Tyson Fury, trust me, when something's going on, if he decides to let people know about it, we'll know about it because everybody's Instagrams will go crazy or their Twitters or whatever else mechanism he is using. We'll know. Right now, maybe he realizes that he screwed up and he's just sort of chilling out and trying to figure out what his next move is going to be.
Right, Dan, we will leave that there now. He's gotten very late here, and I'm sure you've got other things to do to wrap up your day. So I appreciate you jumping on me soon. Thank you for speaking to me. I'll hopefully see you soon.
You bet, my man. Always a pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me on.